When James Garner got into a race car at 150 miles per hour for the first time, he started laughing. The professional driver next to him had spent years in Formula One and had never seen a reaction like that from anyone. 3 other actors that same day could barely keep their hands on the wheel. 2 years later, Garner owned a racing team competing at Daytona. This is that story. Or, James Garner once had an hour lead in a 1,000-mile desert race across Mexico. One sharp rock took all of it away. He was driving a modified Oldsmobile 442 against purpose-built off-road machines. He was beating every single one of them. By the time he crossed the finish line, he had lost the win, but earned something the entire racing world still talks about. You need to hear how this happened. How a movie changed everything. Bob Bondurant drove race cars for a living in 1966, competing in actual Formula One, and he got hired to test 4 Hollywood actors at Riverside Raceway to see if any of them could handle a real car at speed. The director of Grand Prix, John Frankenheimer, wanted to film at actual F1 tracks during the live season. Monaco, Spa, Monza. He needed his actors behind the wheel for real. So Bondurant took each one for a hot lap. Brian Bedford could barely steer. Yves Montand looked terrified. Antonio Sabato struggled with the basics. Then James Garner got into the car, and Bondurant pushed it past 150 miles per hour. Garner started laughing. Not nervous laughter, the kind where your whole body relaxes because you just found the thing you were supposed to be doing your entire life. Carroll Shelby, who was working as the film's technical advisor, assigned Bondurant to train Garner full-time at Willow Springs Raceway. They started on Shelby Mustang GT350s, moved to open-wheel cars, and eventually put him in actual formula machinery. Within a week, Garner picked it up so fast that the director stopped using stunt drivers for certain shots and put Garner in instead. Think about that for a second. Professional racing drivers on set watched a TV actor match their pace, and several of them later said he had the talent to race in Formula One if he had chosen a different career. What did Garner do after filming Wrapped? He went straight to Charlotte Motor Speedway and enrolled in a high-speed driving school taught by NASCAR legend Curtis Turner. He brought comedian Dick Smothers along just for fun. But Garner had already made up his mind about something much bigger than a driving course, and it involved building a full racing team from scratch. Building a race team from Hollywood money. In July 1967, Garner became an equal partner in a new racing operation alongside Bondurant, PR man Don Rabbit, car builder Dick Gullstrand, and manager Sandy Sandin. They called it American International Racing, or AIR. Garner, a Korean War veteran with a Purple Heart who served in the 5th Regimental Combat Team, insisted on painting every car in red, white, and blue with American written across the bodywork. The team started with 3 factory-built Chevrolet Corvette L88 convertibles. These were central office production order cars shipped directly from the St. Louis plant with closed-chamber aluminum heads and race-spec engines. Air entered all 3 at the 1968 24 Hours of Daytona, and they got absolutely destroyed. The cars overheated so badly that the crew changed differentials 4 times during the race. At one point, they pulled the spare tire carrier off to help with airflow, and FIA officials made them bolt it right back on. The team finished 29th. All 3 Corvettes were sold after that single race. Now a lot of people would have walked away. Garner doubled down. He replaced the Corvettes with a pair of Lola T70 MK3B coupes, each running a Traco-built Chevrolet 302 V8. Together, those 2 cars cost roughly $350,000 in 1969 money. His drivers, Scooter Patrick and Davey Jordan, brought them to the 1969 24 Hours of Daytona with a simple strategy. Forget speed. Survive. And that is exactly what happened. While the faster Ford GT40s and Porsche 908s blew engines and dropped out, Garner's Lolas kept running lap after lap. One finished 2nd overall. The other came in 7th. A 2nd-place finish at Daytona for a team financed by an actor. That result forced the entire paddock to stop treating air like a vanity project. Garner also commissioned a custom Formula 5000 car from John Surtees. the only driver in history to hold world championships on both motorcycles and four wheels. The Surtees TS5 ran a 450 horsepower Chevy V8, and the team campaigned it across the SCCA Continental Championship Series. At the San Jovite round in Canada, an 8-car pileup on lap 1 knocked them out before they could even compete. But none of these setbacks slowed Garner down, because he had just discovered the kind of racing that suited him even better than pavement. A muscle car where it had no business being. James Garner's first off-road race was a complete failure. At the 1968 Stardust 711 in Las Vegas, he co-drove a Porsche-powered Myers-Manx buggy with Scooter Patrick, and they never made it to the finish. That same year, they joined Bill Strop's Ford Bronco team for the NORA Mexican 1000 and ended up racing alongside Indy 500 winner Parnelli Jones. Garner wrestled a 650 horsepower Bronco through the Baja Peninsula, while ABC's Wide World of Sports filmed the whole thing, giving desert racing its first real taste of national television coverage. After that, Garner wanted to do something nobody expected. He called up Vic Hickey, one of the best fabricators in California, and handed him a pre-production Oldsmobile 442. Hickey turned that Detroit muscle into a full desert racing machine. He lifted the chassis 3 inches, swapped the stock spindles for modified Chevy truck parts, rebuilt the entire suspension, added a 50-gallon fuel tank, and dropped in a 410 cubic inch aluminum racing engine. Goodyear signed on as a sponsor to promote their new Grabber tires, so the car became known as the Goodyear Grabber. Garner entered the 1969 NORA Mexican 1000 behind the wheel, and he drove it hard enough to build a lead of nearly 1 full hour over every other car in his class by the final checkpoint. Think about that. A Hollywood actor in a modified street car had an hour on purpose-built off-road racers. Then one rock ruined everything. A sharp stone shredded a rear tire. When the crew swapped it, the blown tire came loose in the trunk and smashed every spare oil can they had stored back there. The engine had been leaking oil for most of the race, and now there was nothing left to replace it with. It took 90 minutes to find oil in the middle of the Baja Desert. Garner limped the dying Oldsmobile across the finish line just 23 minutes behind the winner, second place, after throwing away a full hour lead because of one bad rock. Vic Hickey said something about Garner that stuck with everyone who heard it. He told reporters that Garner was not the bravest driver he ever worked with, but his memory was better than anyone he had ever seen. If Garner hit a bump on a pre-run, he could come back 5 days later and point to it within 10 feet. That kind of recall separated the real drivers from the guys who just liked fast cars, and Garner had it. The Grabber story should have ended there, but Garner was already planning 2 new machines before the dust even settled. 10 Ramblers and something called the Banshee. While the Grabber was racing across Mexico, Garner pulled off a second operation at the exact same time. He signed a 3-year sponsorship with American Motors Corporation and prepared 10 modified 1969 AMC SC Ramblers for the Baja 500 race. 10 separate cars, all built through his own shop. He could not drive any of them because he had a film commitment in Spain. But 7 of the 10 Ramblers finished the race, and 3 landed in the top 5 of their class. For a fleet of cheap American sedans prepped by an actor's garage, those numbers shocked the off-road community. Can you imagine the reaction when guys running $50,000 custom builds got beaten by a bunch of Ramblers that a movie star put together? And Garner had something even crazier in the works with Vic Hickey. The two of them designed a car that threw out every rule the Grabber had followed. Hickey built a tube chassis frame, covered it in fiberglass body panels shortened by George Barris, the guy who built the original 1966 Batmobile. The engine sat repositioned 27 inches toward the rear for better weight balance. The custom long A-arm suspension gave it a wild 11 inches of travel, which was unheard of at the time. They called it the Banshee, and off-road historians now point to this car as a direct ancestor of the modern trophy truck class. In 1972, Garner actually won the Riverside Grand Prix driving the Banshee. And get this, he crashed the car near the end of the race and still crossed the finish line first. Garner continued entering NORA and SCORE desert events through 1973 in various Hickey-built Oldsmobiles. But by then, A new TV show had taken over his schedule completely. The producers of the Rockford Files needed him on set 5 days a week, and the racing had to stop. Or at least, that is what everyone assumed. Because Garner figured out how to keep driving fast even while shooting a television series. The Rockford Turn and 3 trips to Indianapolis. Every car chase on the Rockford Files between 1974 and 1980 had James Garner behind the wheel. No stunt double, just Garner, throwing a gold Pontiac Firebird around city streets at speed while the cameras rolled. He created a move that stunt coordinators and fans now call the Rockford Turn. You have probably seen it. The car whips 180 degrees at full speed and takes off in the opposite direction. Garner performed that maneuver over and over for 6 seasons, and it became one of the most copied stunts in television history. The Firebird itself turned into an icon, almost as recognized as Garner's own face. The racing world never let him go entirely. Indianapolis Motor Speedway invited Garner to drive the pace car at the Indy 500 3 separate times, in 1975, 1977, and 1985. That invitation carries real weight. The Speedway only gives it to people the motorsport community genuinely respects. And 3 separate invitations over a decade told everyone exactly where Garner stood. Then in 1978 came the honor that separated him from every other car-loving celebrity in Hollywood history. Garner was inducted into the very first class of the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame, alongside NORA founder Ed Perlman. This had no celebrity category and no honorary status. The people who actually raced in the dirt, who broke bones and wrecked cars and slept in trucks at checkpoints, voted him as one of their own. Parnelli Jones later told Racer magazine that Garner was very special, and that respect ran both directions. Even at 59 years old in 1987, Garner announced plans to launch a new IndyCar team with a $3.5 million budget. The team never came together, but the attempt tells you everything. Nearly 2 decades after Air shut down, he was still trying to get back on a starting grid. However, the wildest part of this story played out decades after Garner stopped racing, and it started with a $1,000 classified ad. The $1,000 barn find. For over 30 years, nobody knew where the Goodyear Grabber ended up. After Garner sold the Oldsmobile, it bounced between owners who crashed it, rolled it, wrecked the body, and eventually reskinned it with new panels. By the early 2000s, the entire off-road community had written it off as lost forever. In 2008, a guy named Ron Johnson saw a listing in Hemmings Motor News for a beat-up Oldsmobile 442 race car with a Vic Hickey roll cage. Johnson collected Hickey-built cars, so he bought it for $1,000 without even seeing it in person. When the car showed up at his shop on a flatbed, it had no engine, no transmission, rust covering every panel, and cobwebs thick enough to grab. It took Johnson weeks of digging through records and measuring the chassis before he figured out what was sitting in his garage. The roll cage geometry matched Hickey's signature fabrication style. The suspension mounting points lined up perfectly. Ron Johnson had just bought James Garner's Baja car for less than the cost of a decent set of tires. He spent years hunting down the original parts. The actual 410 cubic inch aluminum engine turned up in one state. The original hood showed up in another. Piece by piece, he rebuilt the Grabber back to its as-raced condition with modern safety updates to meet current regulations. In 2010, the car went back to Baja. The restored Grabber entered the NORA Mexican 1000 Vintage Race, and legendary off-road driver Rod Hall, one of the winningest desert racers in American history, handled the shakedown runs at age 72. Hall pushed the old Olds through canyon roads and confirmed the car was still handled with real precision after 4 decades. The Grabber was back in the same desert where Garner had built that impossible hour-long lead, running the same terrain, carrying the same paint scheme. James Garner died in 2014 at age 86. When people talk about Hollywood racing, they usually bring up Steve McQueen first, and Paul Newman had the longest competitive career of any actor. But Garner covered more ground than either of them. He competed in endurance races, open-wheel events, and off-road competition across 3 different continents. He owned and operated a multi-series racing team that finished second at Daytona. He fielded cars at Sebring and the Baja 1000. He commissioned machinery from a Formula One world champion. And the professional drivers who raced with him said he belonged on any grid he entered. Garner never pretended to be a racer. He just happened to start pretending in a movie before the real thing took over. All right, if Garner's story caught you off guard, you are going to want to see what comes up next. Click that video on screen right now because this rabbit hole goes way deeper.